Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang in California. Like I say, you should never see me at 6:09 a.m. Shoo, 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 shoo. Today, I am on Words and Wisdom Wednesday, number 1643rd Morsels of a Thought. 1643rd Morsels of a Thought. And we have been talking about about power recently. And I wanted to go to somebody who had done a treatise on power, Soren Kierkegaard. So I'm going to read you his uh, an excerpt of his from Another Life is Possible from a magazine called Plow. And The Power of a Resolution is the name of this article. It is from, let me tell you where it's from first. It goes way down here, and then it's from Soren Kierkegaard, 18 Upbuilding Discourses, published by Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University Press, 1990, pages 347 through 375, used by permission for this article, Plow, which I'm reading from. The article was printed on April 13th, 2023, and it was The Power of a Resolution. Making a decision is significant, but only if we carry it out in daily life. By Soren Kierkegaard. If it is really so that there is something in life that can have such power over a person that it little by little makes him forget everything that is noble and sacred and makes him a slave in the service of the world of the moment, if it is really so that time has or can gain such power over a person that while it adds days to his life, it also every passing day measures the greater distance of his life from the divine until he, trapped in everydayness and habit, becomes alienated from the eternal and the original. If experience has taught us that this has also happened to someone who once had a strong sense of the presence of the eternal, then it certainly would be beneficial to recommend every means against this, and desirable that the recommending be done in an earnest but also winsome way. The eternal is usually a higher power or God. God be praised. That was the next word. God be praised, there are many means, just as the dangers are many, and every one of these means is trustworthy and tested. One such means is resolution or coming to a resolution, because resolution joins a person with the eternal, brings the eternal into time for him, jars him out of the drowsiness of uniformity, breaks the spell of habit, cuts off the tedious bickering of troublesome thoughts, and pronounces a benediction upon even the weakest beginning, when it is indeed a beginning. Resolution is a waking up to the eternal, and therefore we praise resolution. The devil uses many arts to tempt a human being, and it is always a dangerous assault when the devil, by means of high-minded resolutions, or rather by talk about them and admiration of them, together with the subsequent distaste when a person sees how little he can do, wants to induce him to give up everything, No, we creep before we learn to walk, and we want to fly is always precarious. To be sure, there are great decisions, but even in regard to them, the main thing is to activate one's resolution, lest one become so high flying that the resolution that one forgets in the resolution that one forgets to walk. It is certainly true that much is already won by making a good beginning, but in the same moment, the point is to come into stride at the beginning, because there is perhaps nothing more demoralizing for a person than having a good and glorious beginning promptly stand in his way instead of helping him to go on. It is a proud thing to concentrate all the threatening dangers and terrors in one place, to charge forth where the enemy's hosts are most numerous. Those are proud words that want to make the sun stand still, so that twilight may not fall before all the enemies are overcome. On the other hand, it is humble to admit that the struggle, even through no fault of one's own, drags out so that every day has its evening, and because of one's fault, drags out in such a way that twilight sometimes falls on a defeat. It is humble to admit that even the progress through life of the most honest contender is difficult, that even the person who walks his way with firm steps nevertheless does not walk with a hero's pace indeed, that when the evening of life cools the contender after the long day, there is still there still is no opportunity for fanfare, since even the person who came closest to the goal does not arrive with the qualifications or the disposition for the rigors of a victory celebration, but weary and worn, desires a grave in which to rest and a blessed departure from here in peace. To be sure, such a person's life was not unfamiliar with great decisions, but he nevertheless admits that his entire life was a struggle, and in conversation with others, he is not tempted to mention proudly the great decisions he has had the honor of helping to make. He is well aware that his telling about the daily struggle would be wearisome to the inquisitive. We are reading an article called Plow, The Power of a Resolution by Soren Kierkegaard. The vector P, underlined P, or the P with an arrow above, is a mathematical symbol that represents power. Power. It's done in electrical engineering, it's done in mathematics, it's done in certain abbreviations. And yet, this was his life. He perhaps experienced the changeableness of life, perhaps that of people, but danger followed him constantly. But as the danger recurred, he renewed his resolution, and in that way he carried through his battle. Although his step was weak, his gait vacillating, at times going backward instead of forward, resolution helped him again, little by little. He still exhorted himself with a beautiful saying, "Do what you can for God, and he will do for you what you cannot do," until again he came to a resolution, even though his resolution seems to be of humble origin, a cripple compared with that high-born resolution. If making a resolution is understood in this way to be the constant renewal of a crucial resolution, an apparent contradiction akin to reminding someone to act as if this were the last day of his life and then pointing out that a long life lies ahead of him, then it remains fixed that resolution is a saving means. But if this does remain fixed, then it is in turn worthwhile to be aware of the hereditary enemy of resolution, cowardliness, which, tenacious of life as it is, always contemplates cutting off or harming the good understanding of resolution with the eternal, gnawing asunder the charm of resolution, which is easy to carry and becomes heavy only when it is broken. Cowardliness prevents a person from doing the good, from accomplishing the truly great and noble to which he has attached himself in a resolution. In the foregoing, we have already directed attention to a kind of superstition that makes a person think that everything is settled by a resolution, which he then is not averse to making, perhaps even in the opinion that through resolutions his life has a superiority that excuses him from being concerned about lesser things. Only on solemn and crucial occasions will he venture everything. Lesser things do not occupy him, alas, but wanting, as it were, merely to dress up in life this way is a glittering delusion. For anyone who allows himself to nourish such ideas about it, the resolution itself becomes a seducer and deceiver instead of a trustworthy guide. It is certainly true and right that the splendor of eternity shines upon the resolution, that in the resolution everything seems decided for eternity, but this is only the first step. Then the resolution changes its clothes and now wants to concern itself specifically with the most everyday matters, and thus in its everyday, or if I may put it this way, in its house clothes, the resolution does not appear as divine, but in its innermost nature, it is entirely the same. In other words, it is the meaning of resolution for human life that it wants to give it coherence and even and calm progress. For this, resolution has the winsome faculty of concerning itself with little things so that one neither disregards them nor is lost in them, so that life goes forward in the resolution, strengthened, refreshed, and invigorated by the resolution. Therefore, do what you can for God, then God will give you a spirit of power and of love and of self control. From Soren Kierkegaard, 18 Upbuilding Discourses, New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University Press, 1990. Used by permission for this article. Soren Kierkegaard was a Danish philosopher, theologian, poet, social critic, and spiritual writer. Now, he's saying that with resolution, you will seem to think that, well, you can seem to think that you have a higher purpose than other people, and sometimes come down with it and be very tired with it and show yourself with it. It's a hard article to understand, but in the end, he says that do for God what you can, and God will do for you what you cannot do. You have to know that your resolution is connected to the eternal. That's like saying that's like saying every purpose you have must benefit the universe around you, including mankind, including the flora and fauna, including the skies, the earth, the planets, and the universe. Okay, so The Oddest Prophet, Soren Kierkegaard, by Malcolm Muggeridge, with one R, Muggeridge. Acquaint yourself with this renegade philosopher who spent most of his life at odds with the established church of his day, incisively and hold on. Okay, The Oddest Prophet, which is Soren Kierkegaard, by Malcolm Muggeridge. This was printed in November 24th, 2015. A renegade philosopher who spent most of his life at odds with the church, Soren Kierkegaard, from 1813 to 1855, is often regarded as the father of modern existentialism. Malcolm Muggeridge, the tart-tongued agnostic and British TV commentator, was fascinated by his life and thought. In this classic profile, he sums up Kierkegaard's life with unusual insight and wit. The prophets, when they appear on our earthly scene, are rarely expected. A king is awaited, and there is a birth in a manger. The venerable, the bearded, the portentous are usually spurious. One of the oddest prophets ever was Soren Kierkegaard, a melancholic Dane, a kind of clippity-clop, ribald Hamlet, who from the middle of the last century peered quizzically into this one, dryly noting before they happened such tragicomic phenomena of our time as universal suffrage, mass media, and affluence abounding. Kierkegaard was insistent that the only way out of these gathering clouds of fantasy was to climb doggedly upwards to the rocky peak above them where God dwells. Marx and Kierkegaard, the two key voices of the 20th century, almost all Marx's prophecies have failed to happen, while Kierkegaard's forecasts have been fulfilled to a remarkable degree. In 1835, when he was 22, Kierkegaard experienced a juncture he would later call an either-or situation. His theological, when I have to put in something from a little, what do they call it when it's atemporal? Anyway, when we used to say, he said, he said. Do you recall this? When we now say, he said, she said. There used to be a time when it was always to be said as, he said, he said. He said, he said. When I was a child, I said, why don't we say he said, she said? You might as well. There's another word there, space for it, for she. Anyway, I was reminded when he said an either or situation. Okay. His theological studies, this is back to Soren Kierkegaard, unlike his brother Peter's, were going badly, and he was wasting time on other pursuits, some of them disreputable. There was always this gregarious, dissolute side of Kierkegaard's character to be considered, his love of company, a glass of wine, a pretty girl. The trouble, of course, arose in the other, the dark side, the seat of his angst, where the clouds of his congenital melancholy would gather. His mood had been intensified by a whole series of deaths in the family. 3 of his sisters, then 2 of his brothers, and then his mother had died in rapid succession. As his brother Peter remarked, the survivors seemed to be spending all their time at the graveside. It all appeared to confirm his father's conviction that a curse had been laid on him and his offspring. Like Faust, his father had turned away from God, and the devil had rewarded him by making him rich and respected. Now the time had come for the price to be paid, and Soren, as part of that price, was sure that he too would die young. How was he to shape up to so brief a sojourn here on this earth? Who was he supposed to be, and what was he supposed to do? What I really need, he wrote at the time, is to get clear what I must do, not what I must know. What matters is to find a purpose, to see what really is God's will. That I shall do. The crucial thing is to find a truth which is truth for me. This is what he was asking himself, how to establish contact with the reality he had already sensed in the universe, the quest for which made all others seem trivial and aimless, how to distinguish it from all the different sorts of fantasy, scientific, technical, political, erotic, which Western man was even then so busy constructing to evade this reality. How to get rid of all his own personal impediments, the ego lifting its cobra head, the appetites reaching out greedily like octopus tentacles, how to strip himself down until there was nothing at all, other than a sense of his own worthlessness. Perhaps at that point he might catch a fleeting glimpse of what he sought, and in catching that glimpse, find that there was a place for him after all in the great drama which Christ's life, death, and resurrection had unfolded to uplift, illuminate, and redeem mankind. If Christianity is really to be proclaimed, it will become apparent that it is the daily press which will, if possible, make it impossible. In 1848, a time of great turmoil in Europe, two significant voices were raised, both at the time obscure and little heeded. One, Karl Marx's, proclaimed the ultimate and inevitable triumph of the proletariat in a worldwide class war, to be followed by the creation of a classless socialist utopia in which all government, all law, all exploitation of man by man would wither away and the human race live happily ever after. The other voice, Kierkegaard's, scornfully dismissed such collectivist hopes for humanity as infallibly leading to a new and more comprehensive form of servitude, slavery. The divine right of kings had been abolished, but the divine right of the people, which had replaced it, would prove, Kierkegaard insisted, an even worse deception, and would give rise to regimes that exceeded any hitherto known in their brutality and claims to omniscience. I am the people, le people c'est moi, was an even more insanely arrogant claim than the famous one of Louis XIV's L'État c'est moi, I am the state. Against the new Leviathan, whether in the guise of universal suffrage, democracy, or of an equally fraudulent triumphant proletariat, he pitted the individual human soul made up in the image of a God who was concerned about the fate of every living creature. He held out the hope of salvation through suffering, the cross against the ballot box or the clenched fist, the solitary pilgrim against the slogan shouting mob, the crucified Christ against the demagogue dictators promising a kingdom of heaven on earth, whether achieved through endlessly expanding wealth and material well-being, or through the ever greater concentration of power and its ever more ruthless exercise. Excuse me. Suppose someone invented an instrument, a convenient little talking tube, which, say, could be heard over the whole land. I wonder if the police would not forbid it, fearing that the whole country would become mentally deranged if it were used. On the whole of evil in the daily press consists in its being calculated to make, if possible, the passing moment 1,000 or 10,000 times more inflated and important than it really is. But all moral elevation consists first and foremost in being weaned from the momentary. Well, oh. We have totally abolished the notion of imitation, and at best hold to the paltriness called social morality. In this way, people cannot become truly humbled so that they genuinely feel the need of grace. A quality which, So he found himself relentlessly pushed into a different sphere of existence. This is where all the pseudonyms were put aside, and he became just Soren Kierkegaard, a poor sinner who knew nothing except that he existed now with time as an eternal present, and that whatever fate might lie in store for mankind, they would never see in this earth their only habitat, or in history their only destiny. A quality which I particularly admire in Kierkegaard is his courage, the courage of a man by nature timid and even cowardly. Having decided that his life must be dedicated to looking for reality or God, he pursued this aim undeviatingly to the end, in spite of physical frailty and ill health, ridicule, loneliness, every sort of discouragement. His chosen mode of expression was the written word. A whole stream of books, articles, every sort of prose composition came from his pen. In the case of his books, he used up his inheritance to pay for their publication, so that on the day of his death, not one penny remained. His life and his money expired together. By his 43rd year, Kierkegaard's life was exhausted, and in November of 1855, he died. This is from A Third Testament by Malcolm Muggeridge. Oh, okay. P is for power. Old Kinderhook.